Welcome to the Endpoints podcast, presented by the ALS Therapy Development Institute. I'm Jonathan Gang. In February 2024, ALS TDI launched the ALS Trial Navigator, a set of online tools designed to help people with ALS find clinical trials. Users can fill out a questionnaire to be matched with trials that meet their criteria, search a global database of studies, and even find sites close to them on an interactive map. Dr. Nadia Sethi, an ALS advocate who became a clinical trial expert after her husband Sundeep was diagnosed with the disease, was instrumental to the conception, design, and rollout of the tool. As we approach 1 year since the launch of the ALS Trial Navigator, Dr. Sethi joins us to talk about what went into creating this comprehensive database of ALS clinical trials and how her own experience helped inspire it. In a first for this show, she also had some questions for me. We worked closely together during the design of the tool and continue to collaborate to maintain it.
My name is Nadia. For people who don't know me, I lost my husband to ALS in 2020. He was diagnosed in 2019. I became very involved in ALS advocacy when he was going through diagnosis. I'm a dentist by training. I have not practiced in many years. I was very happy being a mom for several years when my husband was diagnosed with ALS, but I have become very involved in ALS since then. I was very glad to be Director of Community Outreach and Engagement at ALS TDI for 2.5 years. I am also pursuing a master's degree in precision medicine because I'm very passionate about finding new ways to tackle ALS. I'm really excited to be here today, John, and I'm very excited to talk with you about Trial Navigator and what it took to get this thing off the ground and how it's going a year later.
Awesome. Thanks, Nadia, for joining us today. And yeah, I guess I'll give myself more of an introduction than I usually do on this podcast. I'm sort of usually just kind of the voice from nowhere and the narrator, I guess, on this show. But today I think personally have a little more, um, I'm a little bit more part of the story. So I'm going to talk about myself for once. And the manager of science communications at ALS TDI. I don't have a personal connection to ALS, or at least I didn't before I started here. Obviously, now I have very many. And my background was in journalism, and I had a particular interest in science journalism. And at a certain point, I think just kind of at a career crossroads, I was looking to move into a comms job, but I was coming from a background working for a lot of mission-driven organizations. And when I found a job posting for a in-house writer at ALS TDI, I was like, oh, here's a science writing gig at a nonprofit biotech company. That's pretty unique. And then the rest is history. So that's me. And I think now maybe we can dive into the story of how this tool came together. So maybe like just sort of um, moving back a little bit, like, can you talk a little bit about how you got so immersed in the world of ALS clinical trials specifically, and like where your interest in all that came from?
Yeah, so let's see. When I I guess I'm a science person. I love science. I always have. And I think when my husband was diagnosed, I was just kind of horrified. And I'll say this, right? Cindy, my husband worked for Big Pharma for almost his entire career. He was a physician by training, but I used to joke with him that I was the real doctor in the family because I could write a prescription as a dentist, and he was never able to write a prescription. Haha. But it was kind of horrifying landing in ALS. And I found myself in a store full of like supplements, like trying to look for vitamins to fix my husband's ALS when he was going through his first symptoms. And I was like, this is ridiculous, right? And so then I met some other advocates And, you start collecting information on what other people are doing. And to me, it just didn't really make sense. Like, I wanted my husband to be able to take a drug that would change his disease and that we would have a reasonable understanding of what it was doing, right? And there was no information on clinical trials, right? We looked at the drugs that were available back then, and it was riluzole and edaravone, and hey, surprise, we're still there today, 5 years later. But there wasn't anything else. So automatically you think about going to clinical trials, but then it's like this huge feat of trying to figure out like what trial to be in and what's most promising and how do I do this? And then you call like the trial coordinators and they don't respond. And you're like, okay, our life is on the line. Can I get a call back? Anyway, but there was not even a central place to find information on all the trials that were out there. And so that kind of became my passion, I think, for several reasons, because I wanted all of that information in one place for me, but I also didn't want other families to have to go through this. I just felt it was kind of ridiculous that we were in 2019 and all I had to go to was clinicaltrials.gov. And let's face it, like, yes, clinicaltrials.gov is a good resource and it's the gold standard, but when you go there and type in ALS, it will pull up, 300 things that, and most of them are not of interest to you in that moment, or they're in a place that you can't get to, or you're trying to figure out, wait, this is an imaging study, but is this actually going to change my ALS, or is it just an imaging study? So like all of those things, right? And then there's the whole extra layer of there are repurposed drugs in clinical trials that are available for prescription potentially from your doctor. And so but nobody's out there telling you that information. And so I was hoping to bring together all of that info. And so that's kind of how this started for me in 2019. And then I was lucky enough to come to ALS TDI where, Fernando and all of you, the whole team really let me run with this idea and build it out and make it even better and bigger and more powerful. So I'm glad that ALS Trial Navigator exists as it does today to kind of bring all of this info into one place as much as possible.
Kind of, yeah. And then I guess, that sort of leads naturally into just like maybe you could just say a little bit about what the ALS Trial Navigator is and kind of how it kind of, I guess, let's just start with like what is it? What's available on the ALS Trial Navigator? Like if someone goes there, what are they going to see
Yeah.
today?
So the ALS Trial Navigator is a set of three tools. Um, One of them is our guided trial finder. And what that will do is it will walk people through a series of questions about where they're at in their disease. It will also ask a few questions about genetics. It will ask questions about location. Um, but really, that questionnaire is designed not only to give you kind of a personalized list of trials where you might meet their criteria, but it's also to kind of get people to think about the things that trials are looking for most often. So usually trials will ask for a specific breathing score, for example, and they'll ask for a time from symptom onset. And so it's a good way for people to kind of get a primer on the things that they need to think about and have ready when they're looking for a clinical trial. We are also fortunate enough to have expanded access programs which offer investigational treatments outside of trials now for people who are living with ALS. And so Trial Navigator will also help find options for people who might be further along in their disease and may not be trial eligible. And so basically that's the questionnaire, the guided trial finder. And then we also have a trial browser. If you keep scrolling down on that page, you will find the trial browser. And it lists all of the trials that we could find globally in one place. And it allows you to filter for different things. So you can filter for a specific gene, you can filter by country, you can filter by, placebo ratios. There's lots of different filters you can apply to that trial browser to kind of narrow down options. And then we also have a beautiful global map, courtesy of Esri, which is an incredible company. We had Pat Dolan work with us on that. Pat Dolan's an amazing guy who works for Esri and lives with ALS. And they helped us create a map of all of those trials that are occurring globally. And so all three of those tools are available in one place in Trial Navigator.
Got it. Yeah, and maybe sort of that's a natural transition once again into talking a little bit about what, when you got here, what went into kind of getting this thing off the ground. I know we did have at the time a kind of database that you were able to sort of start from. But I think obviously it's been completely changed and improved vastly. But yeah, just what were sort of did the process at least beginning to kind of build this thing out into what it is now. Yeah, what was that like?
Yeah, and I think you probably have a lot to say on this too, because you were there right from the beginning,
I
right? But
I
so
was.
first, yeah, you were. So we'll come back to your side of this in a minute. But but I think to me, like the most important thing was like well, I guess I'll say this. I remember feeling very lost, and I remember going to Fernando at some point, and I was like, I need to talk to other people about like how to do this. Like I don't work alone. I need community feedback. I need like a team to move this forward. And so we put together an advisory board that really became critical um, of people who are going through the disease now and caregivers and people who had genetic forms of ALS. We kind of brought it all together so that we could really get feedback from them. And we met with them every 2 weeks for a very long time, for many months. And, it was a painful process of going step by step and putting that questionnaire together in trying to understand exactly what filters should be there, and trying to understand, is this eye gaze friendly enough? And, we may not be, but we did try very hard to do that. But it was quite a process of a lot of input. And I think I'll say for me, like the most interesting thing was like trying to let go of some of the control because, our web team at TDI is absolutely incredible, but I never had that at my disposal, right? I had a lot of control when I was creating Signal where like I would make a change and then I could see how that change looked in the tool right away. And so having this very powerful tool where like our web team could actually really build things out, but I couldn't see it in live time was an interesting dynamic for me to get around, but I think we did a good job. But yeah, I think those were some of the memorable things about it. I really loved interacting with that team and the people with ALS and the caregivers who were there. Like they were just an integral part of this. So I'll ask you the same question because you were there, John, from the beginning. How was it for you?
Yeah, I think it was great because, I sort of stepped into that role in sort of a roundabout way. At the time, I was managing daily updates of the clinical trial database that we had at the time, which, essentially Trial Navigator is built on top of it. So, I do think, like I said, a lot of that foundation was there. I think our web team had set up a really great system where, just for people out there, like this is how the sausage is made. They had something set up that would send me an email every morning that automatically showed if any new ALS trials had been added to clinicaltrials.gov or if any trials that were already in our database were updated. And it was relatively seamless, but I do think, our system, I think it was good. It wasn't the most user friendly, particularly in terms of we had tried a bunch of different things to make it easily searchable during my time with it, like having people be able to put in certain inclusion exclusion criteria things or like put in a zip code and get things closer to them or farther away from them. But then, it thought when you came in, like basically just none of them worked all that well. So when you came in and started talking about like, oh, let's, talking about the questionnaire, talking about really dialing in and making the sort of filtering functions more precise. I think it just made a lot of sense. It really seemed like we just kind of had this system for collecting data that worked really well. And now we were on sort of the verge. We're just talking through a lot of ideas that really made a lot of sense to um, just make it more easier for people who out there to find what they actually needed to find and to see trials that they at least probably are going to be eligible for. There's no guarantees and things like that, but I think we've created a system where people can get a list that's much more likely to apply to, um, yeah, what they actually might be able to enroll in.
Yeah, and I think behind the scenes, like I think you and I and the web team and all of us, we
Mhm.
went through like all of the things, the information that was that you were collecting on a daily basis and inputting into the previous tool that existed. And we had to revamp all of that. One of the things that we really changed with this new set of tools is like now there's trials specific to genetics, right? And so
Mhm.
like, building that out. I remember there was a point where I was like, okay, I know this isn't working, but you guys need to figure out what's wrong and how to fix it, right? And like, and you guys did. I think it was between you and the web team, John, where you were like, no, this is how it has to be, and this is why. And I was like, okay, fine. But I am the type of person where I need to actually be able to um, play with the final product to understand if it works properly. But like you guys were able to make those leaps in advance of that point and to fix the problems behind the scenes, which I thought was really cool. But yeah, I think getting that genetics piece to work was very
Mhm.
interesting. And I'm really proud of that because we were the first, we're the only tool really out there to really take a dive in, especially with that questionnaire to ask people about their genetics and then
Mhm.
try to match up trials based on that. Hopefully, to also get people to have those conversations with their clinicians, like, hey, there's a trial in Europe with this weird UNC13A variant, right? Like, am I being tested for that? And, there may be good reasons to test for that or not per their clinician. But if they never know and their clinician never talks about it, then like maybe that's a problem, right? So hopefully we're drawing attention to things that people wouldn't normally talk with their doctor about so that they can
Mhm.
have those conversations.
And yeah, I mean, maybe to that end, do you want to talk a little bit about now where the data is coming from? Obviously a lot of it is clinicaltrials.gov, but there are other places too. So, yeah, do you want to say a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, so I am very lucky to be very connected in the ALS community, and people send me articles all the time and press releases, and also with the Facebook group that I run, I'm constantly looking for new content to post there, not only to, drive engagement there, but also to, have the information. So yeah, we are pulling from clinicaltrials.gov, but I was really insistent that we need to pull from every global registry. So look, all trials are not listed on clinicaltrials.gov. Phase one trials are not required to be listed on clinicaltrials.gov, for example. And also there's a lot of global trials that are not listed on clinicaltrials.gov. And, edaravone was approved based on a trial in Japan, right? So yeah, it is relevant to me to hear about drug trials in other countries that may be happening. Even if it's not available, excuse me, in the US. There's a lot of repurposed drugs that are in trial in Europe, for example, right? And so would those be options for people to talk to their doctor about to get an off-label prescription? Yeah, potentially they would, right? And so having the global perspective to me was very, very valuable. To have the trials in Asia included was really valuable. I think there was two trials that we came across that we added to Trial Navigator at the end of last year, where like there were like trials targeting genes using AVs in like Japan, which I didn't even know. I think one was in Japan, one was in China, maybe. But they were in Asia, and like I had no idea that was even happening. Like nobody really knew. I didn't hear about those at like the scientific conferences and stuff that I went to and stuff, because the global community is actually disconnected as well. So yeah, so we are pulling from every global registry, clinicaltrials.gov, and then the WHO registry, which is more comprehensive. And then we have the flexibility of updating based on, some of those press releases and stuff too, right? So if we hear from a company that their trial has ended or, is no longer recruiting, we have the flexibility to make those changes, and we do. As soon as that type of news comes up, we're able to make those updates prior to them having to show up in a trial registry. And the truth is that a lot of times registries aren't updated as much as we'd like. And so it's really powerful to be able to do that when we need to. And on our end, when those changes are made, we document it, where we're getting our information from. So if I reached out to a PI, which I will do because I'm crazy, I will reach out to a PI and ask them, the status of the trial. Or if I reach out to a company and ask them the status of the trial, and they're able to give me an update that's relevant, I will document that I got this information on this date at this time from this person from this place, if it's not coming like from a press release or something. So yeah, but like I think having that accurate information is really important. And I know that since you're doing day-to-day stuff, like this is like this is you. So I'm sure you have stuff to say on this too, John.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I do think it's sort of but I think on my end it's pretty straightforward, which is once again it's just like a testament to it's if I make it sound the parts of it that are easy because of a lot of hard work, I think. So,
That's what I was trying to get
yeah.
at too, right? But
Hmm.
like that it was set up well in a
Yep.
way to help you do
Hmm.
this well. But you're also a smart guy who's spent a lot of time, behind the scenes of it, and you helped to put those things in place, right? We all did to make the day-to-day upkeep easier, which I think is critical in the sustainability of the tool and keeping
Hmm.
it forward.
Totally. Thank you. Um, now it's maybe like, this has been out there. Should have looked this up before we got on the line. Like when we launched in March, I want to say it's been close to a year, right?
I think we launched in February, yes.
February. Okay. What kind of feedback have you heard now that it's been out in the world for a while out in the community? Like, do you know, like have people, to your knowledge, been using this and signing up for trials and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that yes, people have been using the tool a lot. There has been very good uptake. Um, it is a valuable tool, especially from the global perspective, right? It has everything. I think for me, it was such a powerful thing to have the info in one place. And I'm not sure that I thought exactly about the next steps that have to come after that, right? So there is the need to be able to connect with the actual trial site. So I think there's still a little bit of a gap there because now people have really good information at their disposal about what trials are happening. But there's a lot of activation energy in making contact with the site and actually getting that enrollment going, right? So that's still a gap that I think exists. But on our end, I think that we've done a really good job on putting that info out. 2024 has been an interesting year because um, between last year and this year, we've had a lot of trial readouts that have not panned out, that we've seen a lot of negative trial readouts in ALS, which is sad. But it's a little bit more quiet in terms of how many trials are out there. And so I think that we've also, while there is a lot of positive feedback about the tool, we've also heard from people that it's still very hard to find trials. But I think the reality is there are fewer trials that are out there at this moment. And so that's, making things a little more complicated. But I think it highlights that there is still more to do in other ways to hopefully make this tool better, and also to to make that final connection, right? That's the part I would love, is if people are really able to use this information to actually connect with trial sites. So, but we, baby steps. We are getting there. At least we have the info at our disposal now.
Yeah, I guess now, do you want, I mean, obviously, when you started this whole thing, you were with TDI full time. Now that's no longer the case, although, you're still around a little bit. Do you just want to say like what your role is in the Trial Navigator now?
Yeah, so I'm still involved with yeah, so I did stop working with ALS TDI full time earlier this year, but I'm still involved behind the scenes. So I still am here to help troubleshoot. And also I'm still helping, the WHO database updates are really sort of tricky and a little bit more messy, a lot of when there's global trials, sometimes the trial sponsor will, so the pharma company will list it on clinicaltrials.gov, and then they'll list it in other global registries in a slightly different way. So that makes it really hard to understand what is just a duplicate listing, or is there another trial going on of that same drug in another country, right? It makes things a little more complicated. And so I'm still managing those updates. But yeah, I mean, we've had community members kind of reach out with concerns because there was a trial, that's showing as recruiting on our trial navigator, but their neurologist is saying that it's not recruiting or whatever. And so, like, I'll help troubleshoot and go behind the scenes and figure out what's going on to make sure that we're accurate as can be on our end. And so that's been useful. I'm still trying to work with other organizations to try to get the word out about the tool. The tool is embeddable in websites. So if anyone is interested in adding the tool to their website, we're totally, ALS TDI is happy to do that for free. And it would really help get the word out. And it is a good resource and I'm very proud of it. So yeah, I'm still involved behind the scenes in that way, but I'm really grateful that TDI is managing the day-to-day, upkeep and maintenance, because it takes a lot of work. It does. So yeah.
And we are happy to have you. So obviously. Okay, cool. Well, I guess I will just thank you so much for joining us and talking through stuff and asking me questions, which is something new and fun. And yeah, I'm looking forward to what we're gonna do with this tool in 2025.
Me too, John. I'm really grateful that the tool is out there and that it's happening. And so good to talk to you, and so good to make you talk about all of the good things you're doing, or some of the good things you're doing at ALS TDI for this. So thank you.
So, great.
Right.
To check out the ALS Trial Navigator and get your own personalized list of ALS trials, visit als.net/ALS-trial-navigator. There are currently no treatments to stop or reverse ALS, but the ALS Therapy Development Institute is working to change that. To learn more about ALS TDI and our research to end ALS, visit als.net. Thanks for listening.